Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to nearly half of first marriages. So how do you announce your divorce? And why are divorce announcements essential to the divorce process? Welcome to a special season of a Fresh Story podcast. Let's talk about divorce announcements.
You get divorced. You get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce. You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello. We're here with Kelly. Kelly, if you could tell us who you are and where you're from and what you do.
Hi, Olivia. I'm so excited to be here. I love this podcast so much, and it's been so helpful. My name is Kelly McMasters. I'm the author of The Leaving Season, a memoir, as well as various other books and essays. And I'm also a professor of creative writing and publishing studies at Hofstra University.
Amazing. Hofstra. My dad went to Hofstra. Kelly and I are both Long Islanders, so you might hear some accents. Okay, Kelly. So obviously this season is about the divorce announcement. And when you got divorced, what did you do? How did you announce it to the world?
Well, I'm hoping this will be helpful because I did not. And my book is essentially my divorce announcement.
Love it.
I think when I left, the leaving was so protracted and prolonged. And the divorce itself, the divorce process took a really long time. So that it kind of dribbled out to various people. My close friends knew, and then it sort of hit in waves. And I had the luxury / pain of moving. I was the one who left the home. And so I moved from Northeast Pennsylvania to a completely new community where I knew nobody and nobody knew me. So I could just say, hi, I'm Kelly and these are my kids. And people would assume what they would want to assume, but I didn't have to explain. And when I did finally start spreading the news, I was surprised. I was so nervous, but I was surprised. Usually it would be in person. I would think, okay, this is going to be an intense conversation. And usually the response would be, I can't believe you lasted that long.
Always what you want to hear. So what made you nervous about it?
I think myself, I was afraid of admitting failure. I think at that point in my life, very different now on the other side of it. But at that point in my life, it felt like no one else was getting divorced. I was sort of the first of my friends. So I also had kids and everybody would say, but what's happening to the kids? How can you do that to your kids? Right. And of course, I thought all of that through before, but that didn't make it any easier to talk about, especially when it's somebody you're not very close to, right? And when you make an announcement like that, you are inviting questions in some ways. So I think some of the most helpful things that I've read have been on your website and through your podcast with the kind of scripts that you give, which I think are so helpful. And I did do that for teachers and things like that. But I wish I'd done that for friends.
Yeah. It's tricky because you don't realize how stigmatized divorce is until you go through divorce, right? And it's funny because as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, yeah, we talk so openly about I lost my job or somebody died, right? But then when it comes to divorce, as a writer, why do you think divorce is in that category on its own?
Oh, for sure. I think it took me probably writing the book the first 2 times before I hit my final revision to understand, for me personally, it's shame. What part is my fault? What part could I have changed? What part should I have seen coming? What part could I have, marriage is such a fantasy, I think. And we have these fairy tales that we believe. And when they crash into reality, sometimes people can, get down on their hands and knees and work with that partner, and the other partner's willing to do that, and you can make it through. Others just can't. And it's not really usually fault, right? Big believer, and thank God for no fault divorce, especially in New York. Little ones. And we have to hold steady to that. But I think the other thing is it shocked me how little I knew and understood about divorce
Yeah.
especially how long it takes.
Yeah.
And I think in the movies, you know, you like wake up and decide, and then a week later you're divorced. And for me, I read once that you should have your passcodes and your, you know, passwords read something aspirational.
Yep. I've seen that. Yep.
Right. Like, you know, if you're saving for a holiday, make your bank passcode like Safari 2027.
Yep.
And so my passcode for a few things for a long time was the first date that the divorce was supposed to go through.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
A year and a half later.
Yeah. Yep.
I was still using that passcode.
That's so funny, Kelly.
And the date doesn't matter, right? The legality part, I think that is another part that gets wrapped up in divorce. It's all about the heart and the brain, and yet so much pressure is put on the legal, and we need to put, you know, put a spotlight on the legal stuff. But just because you sign a piece of paper doesn't mean anything's resolved.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And I remember, and I give this advice I get a lot of women who come, you know, I'm sure you do too. And I tell them, you can table the emotional processing until later, because you need to get through the hard shit, get the legal stuff, get that paperwork signed. Then we'll take care of the rest of you, right? It's almost impossible. Probably it is impossible to do it all at one time. You can't heal until that's settled, right? So where did the idea for the book come from, and how long was that after your divorce?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working on the book for about 10 years. I'm an essay writer. And so I had started some essays earlier, even when we were still married. Some of those were happening, and I wound up revising them. But it was really in the midst of the leaving. And that's why it's called the leaving season, because I was so confounded by the process that I needed to take to the page, which is where I process, to understand how I got there, what happened, how do I move on in a healthy way. And I think there's still so much I don't understand, but it was helpful for me to be able to understand my own story so then I could tell it to my kids, and then they can have the freedom to build their own stories without mine overshadowing them. Yeah,
I love that, because I talk to so many writers, so many women now are, you know, we're in this season of life that they're getting divorced. And I get a lot of people, myself included, that I'm like, how do I write about my divorce? Well, I have 2 kids, right? It's like, you know, you don't want to include certain things, right? Because they need to make opinions about the people in their life. And I kind of joke that you need to be able to write about your divorce without writing about your divorce, right? It has to be like, you know, this thing. Like, and I was just actually today editing an essay that I'd written about right after my second son was born, and the postpartum time with my ex-husband, which was not fun. And I didn't include him in the piece, but it was all about him. Right. Yeah. And so as a writer, that's really tricky. Do you have advice for people who are going to be announcing their divorce, whether it is just a text message or a Facebook post, or a writer, you know, listening to this? What would you say? How do you address that?
I would say do what you can to keep it as close to the bone as possible. So you don't have to speak for anyone but yourself. You don't have to speak for your partner that you're breaking up with. You don't have to speak for the kids. The kids are so smart, right? Yes. They also don't need a piece of paper to tell them if their parents are married or not. That does not matter.
Spoiler alert for anybody listening. Yeah, they figure it out.
They know. And I would say just remain respectful, figure out what's important to you and make sure you're following that as a code of conduct. And, a lot of times with my book in particular, people, before it came out, they would say, but your kids might read it. And I would say, yes, I want them to read it. A, they were there.
Yep.
So they know a lot of it. And B, it's my story. Yeah. And it's not a revenge story. It's from my perspective. So it makes perfect sense to me that your essay would not have him in it.
Right.
Of course, he's there. It's about him, but he's not in it.
Right.
And that's, I think, probably the most respectful. You need that critical distance, because that means you're looking at you and you're caring for you.
Right.
And that's really the only truth that we know. We only know our own truth.